Hello there, 8th grade Grizzlies. This is Miss Brown, aka the voice of your 8th grade Edpuzzle. And today we are going to review for your variations test, which is coming up on March the 4th on Tuesday. So let's go ahead and get started. So you should have this review sheet in front of you to help you. This is a good tool to help you study and prepare for your test. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is go through this review sheet and kind of make you aware of some sample questions that you might see on your test. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, this dichotomous key right here, this part, I'm going to do a separate video on this one because there's a few things that I want to go over and explain, and I don't want this video to be super long. So I'm going to start with the reproduction, and then, like I said, I'll do a separate short video to go through these because there's a couple other examples I wanted to include that kind of piggybacked off of the dichotomous key gizmo that you did in class the other day. All right, so let's go ahead and start here with sexual and asexual reproduction. So this Venn diagram compares the two, okay? So for sexual, you could go ahead and put 2, and for asexual, put 1, because we all know sexual reproduction involves 2 parents, asexual is 1, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to list them out, the differences. You do need to know the differences between the two. Not only do you need to know the basic definition, but you'll need to be able to read a question and analyze based on the question whether it's 1 parent or 2 parent. And there'll be some samples of that in this Edpuzzle. Okay, so I already said that asexual reproduction is 1 parent. Okay, the offspring are genetically identical. Okay, so there's no variation. So it's basically a clone or a copy. Just like you copy something on a copy machine, that's the same thing with asexual reproduction. It is an exact copy of that parent. Okay. It uses mitosis. And there is no fertilization. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to move on to sexual reproduction. Okay, that's 2 parents. Okay. So, like for example, flowers. If you have pollen and you have the pollen, if something pollinates, that is sexual reproduction. So I would write that word off to the side. Pollinates, that is sexual reproduction. If you hear the word fertilize, that is also sexual reproduction. Okay, so those are just some keywords. Okay, and the big thing here is the offspring are not genetically identical. Okay, so like I told a couple of my classes, there was a question on your last test, something to do with the fact that Kate has green hair, not green hair, forgive me, green eyes, red hair, and freckles like her mom. And her dad had, I think, brown hair and brown eyes. And it said, the question was, why did Kate look more like her mom than her dad? And the answer to that is she expressed more traits from her mom. Okay? So she wasn't identical to her mom, but she had a lot of her mom's traits. Okay? So offspring are not identical. They look different, but they have traits from both parents. It uses meiosis, and there is fertilization. So like I said, when you see the word fertilization, pollination, those are keys that it is sexual reproduction. Okay? All right, let's go to the next page. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do the middle. Forgive me. Okay. So what do they have in common? They both produce offspring. Okay. So I'm going to pause and let you all kind of catch up, and then we're going to go to the next page. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so it says list one advantage of sexual reproduction and a disadvantage. So, advantage of sexual reproduction is you have varied offspring. And then again, that means they are not identical. Okay? Another advantage is it reduces the chance of disease being passed on. Okay? And when I say reduces the chance of a disease being passed on, okay, so when we look at asexual reproduction, it's one parent. And if that parent has a defect, it is going to be passed on to that offspring. Because remember, in asexual, it's a carbon copy. So, for example, this paper, if I put this paper through the copier, it's going to copy everything it sees. Okay, so there's no variation. Whereas if you have sexual reproduction, if there is a disease or some sort of defect that's harmful, there's less chance of it being passed on. Okay? All right, so let's look at some disadvantages of sexual reproduction. The main disadvantage is you must have a mate. Okay? All right, moving on. We're going to look at the advantages of asexual reproduction. There's no mate required. And it can occur quickly. Okay, and when I say it occurs quickly, the process produces offspring quickly. And by that I mean it can happen over the course of hours, like bacteria, or it can happen in the course of a week, like the planaria. That's a microscopic organism that if you cut it in half, within a week it regenerates. Okay? So that's a form of asexual reproduction. Whereas with sexual reproduction, it takes longer. So for example, to create a new human, a woman is pregnant 9 months. Elephants are pregnant for, I believe, 24 months. And I believe dolphins are pregnant for 10 to 12 months. So it takes a longer time to produce offspring with sexual, whereas with asexual it occurs quickly. So I'm going to go back and add this as a disadvantage for sexual reproduction. We're going to put takes a longer time to produce offspring. Okay, there we go. And with asexual, it occurs quickly. Okay, disadvantage. The main disadvantage is there's no genetic variation. And I touched on that a little bit earlier when I was saying about that reduces the chance of disease being passed on. Like I said, with asexual reproduction, you have one parent, and like I said, if that parent has a defect, that organism will get it because it's going to be identical genetically to the parent. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to adaptations, which is going to be a lot of your tests. So let me readjust my camera here. Okay, so we're going to go over structural, behavioral, and physiological adaptations. I think you guys probably understand the structural pretty well. It's these two that can be a little confusing. So let's go through it. All right, a structural adaptation is a physical Okay, so it's a physical change or a physical part of that organism's body that is used for survival. So what I was telling my classes is this is how it looks. Okay, so some examples would be turtle shells, because the turtle shells are used for protection. The giraffe has a long neck, so it can reach the leaves at the top of the tree. Bird beaks. So if a bird eats nuts, it's going to have a strong, thick beak that it can use to crush the nuts open. Whereas if it's a bird that eats insects, it's going to have a long, skinny beak so it can drill into the trees to obtain the bugs out of the tree. Okay. Some other structural adaptations we talked about were fur, okay, fins, like sharks have. Sharks and fish, they have fins that help them to swim. Claws. Okay, so any of those are considered to be structural adaptations. Okay, moving on, behavioral adaptation. This is how it acts. Okay? So these are activities an organism does to survive. Okay, so your examples here, the big one, hibernation. Okay, bears hibernate in the winter to conserve energy. Okay. Migration. Birds that live up north, they fly south for the winter because it's warmer and there's more food. Okay. Another one is howling. Okay, I think wolves, they live in packs and they howl. Okay, that would be another behavioral adaptation, is living in packs. Okay, being nocturnal. There are some animals that are active at night and sleep during the day, like my cat. He sleeps all day and at night he's running around tearing up the house. Owls, they sleep at night and they hunt. They sleep during the day and they hunt at night. Okay, dancing for a mate. That is also a behavioral adaptation. And then I'm going to add in one more, hunting. Okay, there's several others, but I just wanted to give you several examples. Okay, and then physiological adaptation. That's the one that's the trickiest. This is an internal response to external stimuli that help an organism survive. Okay. So, some examples of that is sweating. Okay, when you get overheated, your body responds by causing you to sweat, and the sweat is to cool you down. Okay, another one is slow metabolism. That's when an animal can slow down. If there's a lack of food, its body's metabolism will automatically slow down to conserve energy, so that animal doesn't have to eat. Okay, sticky silk on a spider web. Okay, so the sticky silk catches the prey for the spider, but then it also has a smoother silk that it uses to move around, so the spider itself doesn't get stuck. Okay. And another one would be milk production for a cow. Milk production. And let me see, there was one more that I wanted to share, and it's escaping my brain at the moment. Oh, there we go. The ability to make venom. The ability to make a poison, like a bee. Well, snakes have venom, and a bumblebee, when it stings you, it has poison. Okay, so all of those are some examples. And let me jump back up here to the structural adaptations. I want to add scales on a fish and blubber. Blubber is just fat that helps the animal stay warm. Okay, and also human skin. Okay, so I think I've given you quite a few examples there. All right, how is a camouflage structural adaptation? Well, it helps the animal blend in with the environment so you don't see it. Okay, so for example, I'm sorry, drew a blank here. Some examples are like a lion. It has like if the area where it lives, if the grass is like not grass, but if the area, the wilderness where it lives is like a beige color and the lion is beige, he blends in really well and you can't see him. Okay, and what that does is it serves two purposes. One, it helps the animal to hide from prey if it's a predator. So if it's prey, it can blend in and hide from a predator. Okay, and it also, for animals that hunt, they can hide and the prey doesn't see it, so it helps it to sneak up on prey. Okay. All right. Describe a behavioral adaptation for a bird. Okay, we touched on this up here. Migration. They fly south for the winter because it's warmer and more food. The fluffing feathers, I'm sorry. Fluffing their feathers can sometimes, they do that as a behavior to attract a mate. They might do it to look intimidating, so other animals will leave it alone. Kind of like a cat hissing. They do that to, look threatening, so they can fluff their feathers to look threatening. Okay. And then when we said migration, they move for food and also to stay warm. Okay. Okay, moving on. Okay, we're going to go through this and we're going to categorize these as structural, behavioral, or physiological adaptations. Okay, so here we go. Marine iguanas excrete excess salt through specialized glands. That's physiological because it is a response to something internal. So something internal is going on. This is the response to secrete the excess salt. Okay, giraffes have long necks to reach the leaves and high trees. That is structural. That's how it's built. So remember, we said structural is how it is built. Behavioral is how it acts. And then physiological, for now, let's say how it responds to stimuli. And hopefully that will help you kind of keep these things straight in your head. All right, peacocks displaying their colorful feathers to attract a mate. We said this earlier was behavioral, and I think that was one of the examples we used. Chimpanzees use sticks to extract termites from mounds. That's behavioral. Some fish produce antifreeze proteins to survive in icy waters. That is physiological. This is a response to stimuli. Okay? The stimulus is the icy water. The response is to produce an antifreeze protein to help it survive. Okay, owls are active at night to avoid predators and to hunt more effectively. That is behavioral. Polar bears have thick fur to insulate against the cold. That is structural. That is how it's built. Plants convert sunlight to energy through photosynthesis. That is physiological. So the stimulus is the sunlight. The response is to make food. Okay, ducks have webbed feet to help them swim effectively. That's structural. It's how it's built. Bears hibernate in the winter to conserve energy when food is scarce. That is behavior. That's how it behaves, how it acts. A viceroy butterfly mimics the monarch butterfly to avoid predators. That is structural. It's how it's built. Because the monarch is poisonous. Okay? The viceroy is not. So the viceroy, it mimics the poisonous one, so that increases its chance of survival. Because animals think it's poisonous because it looks very similar to the monarch. All right, humans sweat to cool down their bodies in hot conditions. That's physiological. The sweat is a response to the heat. That's the stimulus. So the stimulus is the heat, the response is the sweat. Snakes produce venom to immobilize their prey for defense. That is physiological. Okay, so the stimulus is the prey. The response is to produce the venom. Birds migrate thousands of miles to find food and breeding grounds. That is behavioral. That's how it acts. And that's the migration. And the last one, chameleons change their skin color to blend in with their surroundings. That is structural. That is how it is built. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the rest of this review sheet is going to review some concepts that we've already learned, but will be on your test. So let's talk about Punnett squares. Okay, so remember, heterozygous is two different capital letters. So heterozygous would be big B, little b. Homozygous is two of the same genes. So it could be big B, or little b, little b. Remember that the larger, the capital letter always is dominant. So the capital letter wins the battle, if you want to think of it like that, for whatever trait. Okay? So let's say this is big B is brown hair, and this is red hair. Okay? So this organism would have brown hair. This organism would have brown hair. This offspring would have red if it had these genes. Okay, and remember, each Punnett square is 25% chance of the offspring having that trait. All right, so what is the probability of the offspring, that the offspring will be homozygous, so homozygous dominant? So if it's homozygous dominant, it would have to be big B, big B. Homo, same. Dominant has to be capital. Okay? What is the probability of the offspring will be heterozygous? So heterozygous has to be big B, little b, because it's two different. Okay? And what is the probability of the offspring being homozygous recessive? Remember, recessive are your lowercase letters. Little b, little b. Okay? So, if you see a question like this, go ahead and kind of like write these out, kind of brain dump it, and then you can answer the question. Now, let's go back here. They said that the parents are both heterozygous. Okay? So, big B, little b, big B, little b. Both parents are heterozygous. So this is mom, this is dad. Doesn't matter where you put it. That's just how I write it. Okay, so remember, the offspring gets one trait from each parent, one gene from each parent. So, okay, so big B, big B. This offspring's going to get a little b and a big B. This offspring gets a big B from mom and a little b from dad. This offspring gets a little b from mom and a little b from dad. Now you can do your probability. So what's the probability of big B, big B? Remember, each one is 25%. So this one would be 25% because it's 1 out of 4. Okay. What is the probability of the offspring being heterozygous, big B, little b? Well, you have two. One here and one here. Okay? So 2 out of 4, that's 50%. And then what are the probability of the offspring being homozygous recessive? It's going to be 25%. Because you have 1 out of 4. Okay? So just remember, homo means 2 of the same gene. So big B, or little b, little b. Heterozygous is 1 of each. Okay, moving on. We're going to jump and talk about environmental factors and extinction real quick. We did this right after Christmas break where we talked about the coral and the habitat loss and the coral bleaching. So, what are 3 environmental factors that could cause a species of animal to become extinct? So one is habitat loss. So cutting down trees that birds live in. Okay. Climate change. We talked about that with the coral bleaching. And the coral being bleached because of the high carbon dioxide in the water, in the oceans, the ocean acidification. And invasive species. And if you remember way back in January when we came back from Christmas break, you watched a video about carp and how the Asian carp were put in a specific area, lake, to eat the algae, I believe. And then they took over and they were competing with the regular, the native fish for food, and they were taking over. So that's an example of an invasive species, because the Asian carp is not native to America. Okay, there are a couple of other factors. So we have pollution, natural disasters, so natural disasters can be hurricane. California had the fires, a flood, a volcanic eruption. Those are all natural disasters. Any type of disease that could wipe out a species. So if the species isn't adapted, the disease might kill them. And then change in resources. So again, if a forest, let's say, burns down and the birds don't have food, and if they don't move to another area, they could become extinct. Okay, moving on. We're going to review cells real quick, and then we're going to go over ecological succession, and then we'll be done. All right, so this is a plant cell. Remember the difference between a plant cell and an animal cell. Plant cells are square. Animal cells are circular. Plant cells have a cell wall for protection, and they have chloroplasts, which help it make food. Animal cells have no cell wall, and they have no chloroplasts. We do not have chloroplasts. We cannot make our own food. All right, so let's go ahead and label this. A is cell membrane. Plant and animal cells have a cell membrane. That's what controls what goes in and out of a cell. B is only in a plant cell. That is the cell wall. That is for protection and structure. C is the jelly filling. That is your cytoplasm. D is the storage area. That is your vacuole. Remember, plants have one large vacuole. Animals have several small vacuoles. Okay, E is the nucleus. Remember, the nucleus is the brain of the cell, controls everything, and this is where the DNA is. F is only in a plant cell. That is your chloroplast. G, don't worry about. H is in both plant and animal. This is your powerhouse, your energy center. This is your mitochondria. Okay. Okay, moving on. This is the function, and I just went through the function of all of these as I labeled it, but we're going to write it out real quick. Chloroplast, it captures light and converts it, captures sunlight and converts it to food for the plant. And again, chloroplast is only in your plant cell. The cell membrane, it controls what goes in and out. And the cytoplasm, that is the jelly filling that protects the organelles. Okay, and all of these are organelles. Okay, remember the organelles are the very small structures in a cell that have a job. So your cell membrane, your cell wall, your cytoplasm, your vacuole, those are all organelles. All right, moving on. We're going to put these in order from largest to smallest. So your smallest is your gene. Genes make up chromosomes. And the nucleus is the brain that contains the chromosomes and the genes. So the genes are on the chromosomes are in the nucleus, and these make up your DNA. right, last question. This picture at the bottom, is this primary or secondary? This is secondary succession. How do you know? Secondary succession occurs after a natural disaster, like a fire, a flood, a tornado. Okay? So you can see you have a mature forest, you have a fire, you have soil, and then things regrow. So how do you know it's secondary? Secondary occurs after a disturbance or a natural disaster, and there is soil. With primary succession, you start with rock. Okay? And then our disturbance, I'm going to say disaster, natural disaster. Oops. So fire, flood, hurricane, tornado, whatnot. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this completes the first part of your worksheet. Okay? I am going to do another short video on dichotomous keys because that's confusing and I kind of want to explain it, make sure you all understand it. So, go ahead and finish this out and I will see you for part 2.